Good morning, everyone. We are delighted to welcome you to the Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication at Rowan University's February virtual workshop. Uh, Today, we are celebrating National Girls and Women's in Sports Day as part of a month-long series of activities honoring this initiative at Rowan. All of these activities are free and open to the public. And today, we are especially appreciative of our co-sponsors for the event, and those include the Center for Sport and Social Impact, the Women and Gender Studies program, which is under the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, and of course the Lillian Lodge Copenhaver Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication at Florida International University. We are excited to have participants from the LLK Center at FIU with us today, and you've been hearing, if you've been just joining us, the executive director of that center, Dr. Lillian Lodge Copenhaver, is with us today, and we are especially happy to be affiliated with that organization. My name is Julie Haynes. I'm the director of the center at Rowan, and it is my distinct privilege to introduce today's speakers. Two leading professionals in sports communication. We're really honored to have them here today. Our first speaker is Gail Dent. She is an associate director in communications at the NCAA, where she manages national and local media and leads communication efforts in the Office of Inclusion, Education, and Community Engagement. Prior to NCAA, she focused on international and national public relations in the U.S. Olympics Committee, and she was a member of the international delegations, including Olympic Games and World University Games. At the University of Kentucky, she managed public relations for several sports and was host media coordinator for NCAA basketball tournaments and championships. And she teaches strategic communications at the University of Indianapolis and is a member of their sports management leadership advisory board. And our second speaker is Marissa Belmunoz, Vice President of Communications for Major League Soccer, where she oversees all U.S., Hispanic, and international communication and media relations for Major League Soccer and its commercial arm in Soccer United Marketing. Under her leadership, the veteran public relations executive has helped position the league as a leader in the Hispanic media within the American sports landscape and as an emerging global force within the competitive arena of international soccer. She also serves on the leadership council of the Lillian Lodge Copenhaver Center for the Advancement of FIU. Again, it is our honor to have such accomplished professionals with us today to share their experiences. First, we'll be hearing a few remarks from Ms. Dent, and then Ms. Munoz will follow afterwards. Then we're going to be opening the session up to questions and discussions. So if you would like to ask a question, please type it in the chat feature of Zoom, and we will work to get those questions answered for you. So Gail, if I could ask you to get us started.
Okay, and I just unmuted. That seems to be the most favorite statement right now. You're on mute. So thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful event. I look forward to sharing some of my experiences with you all, and I'll be talking primarily to the students today, this morning, as I chat. And, you know, I've always been a sports fan. I like to tell people that sports is my avocation and communications is my vocation. So I've always loved the sports industry. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got into it. It's a different story, and hopefully it will be beneficial to the students. And then I'm going to close with a few good tips. I'm more interested in hearing what their questions are about getting into the industry and even what we see going on right now today. But as I stated, I've always loved sports. My family was a big sports family, and you know, I watched it when I was young. The sport of choice for me was football. And I am a Kentucky girl, so that is surprising to a lot of people. They think, oh, you were born with basketball. Football was the sport that I wanted to go into, and this is the throwing football, uh, different from what Marissa Bell will talk about, the kicking football, the international. But you know, this past weekend with Super Bowl was one of my favorite weekends, in addition to what I do at the NCAA with Final Four. I went to Eastern Kentucky University and just lucked out in finding a sports management program, one where it was in state, so I could save my parents a little bit of money. And then two, in finding an area that I felt that I would really enjoy working in as I got my career going. So my major was in public relations with an emphasis in sports. So for the students that are out there, you know, I took the journalism classes, the broadcasting classes, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of law. The odd thing about it, I also had to take coaching, baseball, basketball, and football. And that was strange because I am not an athlete by nature. So that was a little different for me. But I got through the classes, and some of the students might be able to associate with this. I got to my junior year and I said, I really want some good experience down on paper. So what I did was I went to volunteer with the sports information office. They didn't have paid internships. The graduate assistantships were gone. I was not a graduate yet. So I went to volunteer with the SID office, and that provided me with the foundation that would ultimately help me in my career. I got to work with athletes. I got to write for the school newspaper. I also got to interact with coaches and media, local and national media. So that was an excellent foundation for me. And in my senior year, I had sports on one side, and I said to myself, you know, I need to get a little bit broader in my education. So what I did was I went to the university public relations office and did volunteer work for them as well. So in addition to working with coaches and athletes, I was also working with the music department, the education department, and other departments within the university structure. And that was an excellent foundation for me because I had the sports, and then I also had the general communications. So as it would go, when I graduated, I was sending my resume out. I still wanted to do football. I wanted to work for the NFL. And I'm sending my resume out to several teams. Friends and family who know me know that I do not like cold weather. So I was sending my resume out to all the warm weather NFL teams, the teams like Minnesota, Green Bay, Chicago. They still don't know who Gail Dent is to this day. But I was sending my letters out and waiting for the response. About 3 weeks later, I started getting responses, and unfortunately, they weren't the responses that I wanted. I was getting responses such as, thank you very much, Ms. Dent, for sending us your information. Fortunately, we don't have jobs for anyone with your level of experience. And I started to get a little discouraged. I said, I'm going to keep sending letters out. I'm still not sending them to warm weather, or excuse me, cold weather locations. I'm sending more letters out, and I'm still getting the same response. So I said, well, maybe this sports venture isn't going to work for me. I had a friend back in Louisville whose mother was working in general public relations for a health industry. And I said, I know that they have some positions open. And in fact, they had some in customer relations. Applied, got the position, not knowing how beneficial solving people's problems and addressing issues at that stage would be for later on in my career. Very beneficial. So I did that. And one evening, I was sitting at home watching television. I'm thumbing through a magazine, and I see where a gentleman had been hired by the National Football League, by the commissioner at that time, who was Pete Rozelle. And he had been hired to look at hiring in the National Football League, looking at women, looking at people of color, also looking at men, just looking at the hiring practices in general. And I got this whim and I said, I am going to send him a cold call letter at that time. So again, we didn't have all of the emails and social media way back when. So I send him a letter. US mail system, he ought to get it in about a week or so. I thought he would respond pretty quickly. I went out to the mailbox, 2 weeks, nothing. 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, nothing. So I'm thinking at this point that my career is going to be in general communications. So I'm doing the job with the healthcare industry, working with doctors, nurses, solving problems. And about 2.5 months later, after I had sent this letter, I'm again sitting at home one evening and the telephone rings and I answer it. And the person on the other end says, hello, may I speak with Gail? And I said, this is Gail. And the person said, Gail, this is David. So long story short, got the position, and it's been a whirlwind from that point on. Was at UK, as Julie said. From there, I went to the US Olympic Committee. And from there, I went to the NCAA, and I've had great experiences working with professional people, organizations, amateur, high school, you name it, in sports, working with media agencies, some of the largest media organizations that there are, not only in the US, but also in the world. So I'm going to leave you with 3 tips very quickly. And again, when I do things like this, I really direct it more to the students, because you need to know this knowledge as you get ready to segue from college into the sports world. Number 1 is, if you're interested in the position, go ahead and apply for it. Don't come out applying for the CEO position straight out of college, but if you're interested in something, go ahead and apply. I have found that we as women, we will look at the qualifications. If there are 10 qualifications, we want to check the box for all 10. Men don't do that. If there are 6 things that they are qualified for, they go ahead and apply. We as women, we need to do that same practice. Go ahead and apply if there's something that you are interested in. Number 2, have a backup plan. You may not get that perfect position straight out of college, grad school. It may take a little bit of time. If I had only looked at the NFL, I might not be where I am right now today. So open your mind, think out of the box, and apply for things, and that will lead you to that great position. And then the last thing, I always tell people that when they're working, do a great job. The sports world is very small. and people know people. Communications, media relations, very much the same, but especially in sports. And as I had mentioned about when I went to apply for the position at UK, they had already checked me out before I had even applied. So your reputation does follow you. Okay. So again, just in closing, keep persevering, be intentional, and set those goals and get ready for an exciting adventure. Hopefully yours is not the roller coaster like I had, but just keep strong and keep moving forward. So I'll close with that and turn it back over to you, Julie or Marissa Bell, to go from there.
Thank you so much, Gail. That's really fascinating story and really important advice. Marissa Bell, we'd be interested in hearing your experiences next.
Yes, thanks, Julie. Well, first, I want to thank you, Julie, Rowan University, for the opportunity. And of course, Dr. Copenhaver and Lillian and the Women's Center at FIU, my alma mater. I'm very proud to be here today and representing FIU as well. Wow, Gail, that was great. That's going to be kind of challenging to follow up, but what I will say is the roller coaster is real, and I think everybody has their own roller coaster. Some of them have more bumps than others. I've yet to hear of a story of someone who went straight into it in a straight line, right? I think what I'll add to what Gail said, I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be in soccer specifically. I grew up in it. My father played semi-professionally. My brother played professionally. I grew up on a soccer pitch, but I didn't grow up playing it. But I did grow up taping games, writing about the games, talking about the games. So I knew from a very, very young age that soccer specifically and communications was my world, was my space. Made the decision to stay local. I'm from South Florida, and went to FIU. And I'm actually glad I did, because I've actually spent the last 19 seasons, the last 19 years. We work in seasons, right? Last 19 years in New York City. And to Gail's point, South Florida and New York City, the weather ain't the same. So I'm glad I stayed when I did at FIU. And I will support what Gail said. When it came to the experience, the internships, the volunteer opportunities, I too was part of the Beacon at the time. Not sure if it's still called the Beacon, Dr. Copenhaver, the newspaper at FIU, but I was very much a part of that organization. Got to know really well the SID, I did cover other sports, basketball, softball, baseball, but the men's soccer and the women's soccer were my priority. I knew that sport inside out. At the time, FIU made the decision to bring in football into FIU, and they were going to cut the men's soccer program. So you guys can imagine, junior writer at the Beacon, hearing this, I took it upon myself to rile the troops up. We created a little bit of noise about the men's soccer program, who I just been in, and I'll date myself here, in 1996. They were the NCAA men's soccer final. They lost to St. John's, ironically. That's where my husband went to school, so I don't hear the end of that one. But the point is, we saved the men's soccer program, and it was a great experience for me personally to be part of that, that group that tried to save it, really, given what we were writing in the paper. A few other things I just wanted to add to what Gail said. I think it's important to have a really good sense of what it is you enjoy, what it is you like from as soon as possible, and try to get into as many volunteer opportunities, internships when you are in college. That will tell you if you like it or you hate it. And if you hate it, don't continue to do it. Because one thing when you work in sports communications, you have to be passionate about it. there's a lot of long nights. There's a lot of breaking news that will interrupt your Saturday or your Sunday or your 8 p.m. dinner time with your family. So you have to be very, very passionate about what you do. And sports is a 24-hour commitment. I'm sure Gail will attest to this. Therefore, if you don't love it, if you don't love a sport or if you don't love sports, you got to rethink about being in sports communications because it is very you have to commit and you have to be very dedicated, especially to do a good job and to keep being happy doing it. And that's something that I always encourage my staff at the office. You have to be happy with what you do, because if not, your output will not be great.
So much. And Marissa Bell, thank you for those specific insights. I appreciate the comments and the questions that are coming through from our students. I know that Professor Klook's class is really starting to talk about issues of, well, the whole class really is, right? Yannick is on communication, culture, and identity. And so several of those questions are coming from those students about what kind of diversity initiatives you've been involved in, or one I saw from Jake, because Jake's one of my students. Hi, Jake. I thought it worked, right? He says, our class is learning about diversity and inclusion within the sport world. Has your work experience ever been more difficult or easier based on your own individual identities? I think that's a great question.
No, it has not been difficult for me being a female African American. I've always associated with the diversity and the inclusion side. The difference, I think, in coming along, and I noticed one of the questions going way back, what's the difference between then and now, is there's more discussion about it. And that's the important thing, is the discussion. That's what we didn't have in the past as much, the discussion. So when I had issues coming along in my career, or even before the career, as I was younger, there wasn't a lot of discussion around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I find that individuals are having some of the same issues that I had, being the only person at the table, the management table, sometimes the only only person of color in meetings. So I think the difference is the discussion, and that's important, so very important right now.
Yeah, I'll add to what Gail just said. In international soccer, it's a very male sport globally. And I can tell you, when I first started, I would get the question all the time from journalists in South America, particularly, how do you know so much about soccer? How come? But you know what? I chose to take those questions as, just a little bit of an education by them, right? Here in the US, we have an opportunity just like everybody else. And as long as you work hard and you know your topic space, well, very few people can question you, because really well about how that midfielder did in that game, right? And what he or she did well or wrong. Or from a PR side, knowing what tactics you want to pursue for a specific story placement, and be very committed to the reporter that you're going to work with and place the feature with. As long as you know and you're confident in yourself about what you're doing, that's one of the biggest sense of value that you can give to yourself as a professional, and then as a person too.
So much. I do want to ask you some practical questions that I see in the chat as well, in terms of, and we've talked about this earlier, because there were some questions prior to the event. What do you see as the biggest challenges, or what kind of advice can you give about the global pandemic and like shifting that work, how you do your work, one, and then also how students can get involved even in the face of these challenges? I know I mentioned you before, I taught a class in the spring, a rhetoric of sport class, and a lot of my students had internships with, the Philadelphia Union or the Philadelphia Flyers, and those fell through. So if you could talk a little bit about the shift of work in your fields for the pandemic, and any advice you would have to give to students on things like internships.
I'll go. So I don't think you'll meet a PR professional this day and age who will tell you that Zoom or virtual remote platforms were not game changers. I think that's changed the way we do PR and the way we do, communications now. It'll be interesting to see how we keep that moving forward when it comes to player access, media interviews, all that good stuff, which I can nerd out on if we time allots here. But what I would like to say though regarding opportunities, I think every company, again, like I mentioned at the beginning, sports and entertainment, one of the biggest areas impacted by the pandemic. We've seen furloughing, layoffs, unfortunately, in our own league and amongst our clubs in the past few months. And just like every other US sports league and really sports teams around the world. One thing I would like to suggest for those of you who can is pairing up your communications degree. I did it not because of pandemic, but I did it similar to what Gail mentioned in her opening about how it helped complement the communications degree that I was able to earn at FIU at the School of Communication, of Mass Communication. I paired it up with degree in international relations. Now, I knew that soccer was my thing, soccer, international sport. I was always very interested in kind of our participation in the global scheme of things. So it aligned for me. But it was very enriching for me as a communications professional as well, because when I started doing my job at MLS, I was able to understand the cultural differences. How people do business in Brazil is different than how people do business in Argentina or in England. So, having that nuance, having that, that education was very, very helpful to me personally. And I think nowadays, if you can, stay a few extra semesters and get that other degree that will help complement your communications degree. And while you're doing it, just volunteer as much as you can, even if you're working for free, if you can. Again, I think that, I did it. Most of the people who work with me at MLS did it. It's getting your foot in the door and showing how hard and committed you're going to work and your creative skills as well. There's no better, selling point for you as a professional. And again, to Gail's point, because I thought Gail's opening was really strong. You have to show your dedication and your commitment, even when you're volunteering for free, because you never know who's around and who can recommend you.
I'll just go ahead and follow up on what Marissa Bell said, just to add a few more points. She's exactly right. I mean, you look at the downside of everything that's happened through this pandemic, and I can certainly speak to that from the NCAA. We lost $750 million last year by not having the men's Final Four. We had other championships that were impacted as well, and some that are still being impacted right now. But we lost a lot of money, and things were very shaky there for a moment. I think we're seeing the light of day right now because there's a vaccine, and the rollout and things along that line. But like Marissa Bell said, there are furloughs. There are people who have lost their jobs permanently in intercollegiate athletics, along with the illnesses that people have had. So you can't forget that. If there is a ray of light, I agree with what Marissa Bell said. The technology has been very beneficial. We've had to learn how to do things differently, and that evolution was coming but we probably didn't see it coming as quickly as it came. And, you know, when the pandemic, COVID hit, you know, at the snap of a finger, we had to shift in the communications industry and what we were doing. You know, people had to learn Zoom and Microsoft Teams and the other platforms and things along that line. The upside I've noticed with programs and some of the things that we do at NCAA, we've been able to actually invite more people. Sometimes people had budget issues, they weren't allowed to travel or they couldn't travel to a conference or a convention. So you ended up missing it. You might get some of the information mailed to you, but now we can do more things like this. And, you know, I look at how many individuals are online. We've had programs for student athletes where typically we might invite them to Indianapolis face to face. You might have 200. This year, we were able to expand that because we were doing it virtually. So we had 300, 350. So you're reaching more people. And I think in public relations, what I'm seeing, people can get into different audiences a little bit easier. I'm seeing some things that folks were being charged for, webinars and things along that line, that are free now. So you're getting educated. You can go online and connect into more things. So I think that it's made us shift our way of thinking, but we're also being more inclusive and doing more things with more people in structures like this.
Much. I think this is really terrific, very practical advice the students can use. And I know that it's sometimes really hard to face the global pandemic. We're all very stressed, but looking at these things that have changed for the, you know, for the good, that have been positive. So, you know, excuse me, Gail is in Indianapolis, Marissa is in Miami. Like, it would have been really difficult to get their knowledge, right, if everybody had to go and meet in one place. So I've been really excited about Zoom and thinking about how the center and can continue to do these kinds of Zoom even when we do have herd immunity. So I really like hearing those ideas. And yeah, the internships. I'm wondering if there's something, if let's say somebody can't, because one of the chat questions sort of asked this, they're sort of limited in their internship opportunities, to reach out to someone via Zoom. Do you have any thoughts on that, like how they can get involved without an actual internship right now? And then if you could speak to and there's also a question, Gail, on, and I know there's a really sophisticated internship program at NCAA. So if you could both talk about, like, if the person can't have an internship, what else could make them stand out? We've sort of talked about that with volunteering, but, and then also the specific NCAA internship program.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. You know, like I had mentioned, there are ways to get different levels of education and experience because we're in this virtual technology world. You can look at webinars of what's happening. NCAA has hosted webinars to where you can get a little more knowledge about what's happening within our walls. There are also conferences and conventions where you can get a little more background knowledge about what's happening in an industry, as well as what issues are prevalent right now within a particular organization, or what people are talking about, diversity and inclusion. You can, like we said, volunteering, that is great. Who is doing this, that, or the other in your community? I think that you have to really make yourself open and look for the opportunities that are out there. There are graduate assistantships. A lot of our interns, if they're not finding jobs or they're not going to another internship, they're also going back to school, and they're getting a little more education in that respect. So again, the opportunities are out there. You just have to be a little creative and really think about how you can push yourself forward so you're a little bit different than the next applicant or the next person who's wanting to do something similar to you. Yeah.
From a practical local standpoint, I would recommend that New Jersey's where you guys are mostly at when you're in school. It's a really rich area when it comes to soccer and clubs. This is obviously very, very specific to the soccer space, but don't underestimate game days. You don't have to be hired by the institution or by the club or by the organization. Game days is a great day. It's a great way to get experience. We can work a game day, help out in the press box. Obviously, when things get back to normal, even though we've opened back up for business, we have limited number of media that are allowed in. Working a press box, assisting with media availability. Those are really good hands-on experiences. Again, they're a little tempered right now because of the pandemic, but if you do it with the USL team or the NWSL local team, or you get your foot in the door with one of our MLS clubs, someone said, I'm not able to commit to a non-paying internship. Game days might be a really good, you allot 2-3 hours of once a week, you work a game day. And that always looks great on your resume. We're always looking for individuals who have had experience either around game day. By the way, it doesn't have to only be soccer. If you've also done other sports, that's fine too, because ultimately press boxes are the same across all sports. But I just wanted to throw that in there because sometimes we overlook we're trying to get an internship or like a full-time volunteer position, but it could just be a game day. And you just have to look at the schedule and see how you can get in with the local team.
And I'll also add into that, we have seen interns at the NCAA, some who have not gotten that internship, as Marissa Bell said, yet, but they've brought other experiences to the table. They've managed people. They have been involved in community service with civic events in their city. It might be a race of some sort of activity. So again, when I look at that resume, I want to see what you've done. That's what I'm impressed with. What have you done? I know you've been in class, but what have you done? And again, sometimes people come to us wanting to learn. They've had good experience. They haven't been in sports. They haven't gotten that opportunity yet. And we can give them that through the internship, but they've come to us with other experiences and opportunities that they've had. And it really set them apart from the individuals who really hadn't done that much at all.
That's a great point, actually, Gail. A few more tangible ideas on that one is, do you run a social media account? Can you go to your local university or your local club? Hey, can I take over and here's a strategy for how you should be running your social media account? Or, hey, I've cut these videos, can I help cut some of your videos? Because every sports club wants to put out videos. That's a very valuable skill set to have at this moment. So, it also goes back to you and how proactive you want to be. But there's things you can do from home. Social media, digital is a big one now, that you can be doing right now.
Yeah, social is very big.
Yes, we just had a question about networking, and I would think that social media would be the way to network right now, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and you'd be surprised. Sometimes people will contact me through. I have an NCAA Twitter account, and students will call the NCAA. Hey, I'd like to speak with someone, or can you come speak to our class? Or they're in an organization. Can you come speak to the organization? I've been approached by people through LinkedIn. So individuals are finding ways to network, even though we have to be socially distanced right now. And again, that goes back to the power of technology. People figure it out very quickly, whether it's on, this person's on Instagram and they have an account, or this person's on LinkedIn, or they're on Twitter. People are figuring it out how to get more involved. And, you can look at people who are doing things that maybe you want to do. And that's the power of Google. I can put a name in there and search on someone and, find out what they've done, how they got to where they are. Sometimes there are uh, feature stories on the individual that will give you some ideas about how to maneuver and proceed forward with your career. So again, the technology is really important right now. And if you know social media,
Right.
yeah, it's like gold. Because things are changing. Everything's not going to be the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, the TikTok, and things are changing. Something new will come. So you have to make sure you're on that cutting edge, if you will. Yeah.
A few groups that we are associated with for the question about networking, some specific, and I'm sure Gail is very familiar, if not part of these organizations as well, is WISE for the women, Women in Sports and Events. We're also partners with AWESOME, the Association for Women in Sports Media. And then, of course, for the journalism students, there's always the NABH and NAHJ, National Association of Hispanic Journalists and Black Journalists. Those are really great organizations to be a part of. I remember when I was in college, I immediately joined up with the NAHJ. And then when I joined MLS was already partners with WISE and AWESOME. So, those are really great touch points. They usually hold great conferences.
Right.
Obviously, it's a little different with the pandemic, but they still hold a lot of conferences, speaker series that I'm sure many of you can take a lot from as well.
Both so much. We're about out of time, but I really wanted to thank you both for your insights, really important sage advice and words of encouragement. So I really appreciate that. If you're a student and you didn't have your question answered, if you want to email that to me, I can try to get the chat feature. But if you think of something else, my email is Haynes, HAYNES @rowan.edu. And I can get that question and see if I can get it answered for you from either Gail or Marissa Bell. So again, I will, like I said, a question just popped up, so I wanted to make sure, but I'll definitely pass those forward for you. So thanks so much to Gail and Marissa Bell. I'd also really like to thank Dr. Copenhaver and the LLK Center's Program Officer, Lillian Abreu. I would like to thank Karen Brager and Amanda Coltree, and our students, Jessica Newell and Sarah McCabe, for helping us with this event. And of course, I'd like to thank Professor Jana Kluk and his class for coming today. I hope you have learned a lot for your sport communication, culture, and identity class. So thanks for joining us. Please do look for some future events that we have. Again, this is the first event that Rowan is celebrating for National Girls and Women's in Sports Day. So there will be a series of events after that. There'll be a March virtual workshop honoring Women's History Month. through the LLK Center and also one at Rowan. And then in April, we are going to be having a Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication virtual workshop in April with some alumni from Rowan and other speakers about communication careers in museums and public spaces. So another interesting area. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really useful, important advice. And thank you again so much, Gail and Marissa Bell, for being here.
Well, again, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Thank
everybody,
you.
please be safe.
Safe,
Stay
be
healthy.
Be
Bye.
healthy. Have a
Thank
great day.
you.
Thank you.